Hello. So today we're reading more than just hello. So today we're reading more than a misunderstood religion, rediscovering voodoo as a tool of survival and a vehicle for independence in colonial Haiti. Eliza M. Cameling Brown, 2016. Right, abstract. The majority of Americans today closely associate the term voodoo with Satanism, witchcraft, and barbaric practice. Yet, far from these ill-formed depictions and misconceptions, which first took root through the Western dominance of 18th century colonial Haiti and have been perpetuated through mediums of popular culture ever since. A closer look at Haitian Voodoo will illuminate that the spiritual practice transcends religion alone and should be better recognized as the very mechanism of unity that spurred Afro-Caribbean independence via the Haitian Revolution of 1791. This paper explores not only the ways in which Haitian Vodou has been intentionally demonized throughout history in order to maintain Western supremacy, but also scrutinizes Vodou as a product of transnationalism, attempting to highlight the ways in which the evolving religion has shaped both the inhabitants of New Orleans through the 20th and 21st centuries, as well as Haitian migrants post-revolution. This essay serves as a framework for rediscovering Vodou as more than a misunderstood religion. Introduction. In the introduction to her interpretive, ethnographic, and anthropological novel, Mama Lola, a Vodou priestess in Brooklyn, 21st century author Karen McCarthy Brown illustrates with vivid detail the first time she experienced a Vodou possession performance. It took place in a cramped brownstone apartment in Brooklyn, New York, where she sat, uncomfortably rigid amidst diverse members of the Vodou family, who were also partaking in and observing the procession occur, and watched as heavy-lidded, thick-jowled woman, as a heavy-lidded, thick-jowled woman by the name of Lourdes thrashed around the crowd. The onlookers, clients, friends, and relatives prayed, clapped, and sang heatedly around the food-laden table centerpiece, calling forth the spirit who would soon begin to ride Lourdes. McCarthy Brown, a middle-class white woman, describes herself as feeling more than a little out of place during the ritual. Little did she know that the experience would ignite a deeply seated infatuation with the complexities of Haitian Vodou and become the jumping-off point for a journey in which she would soon commence. Her studies in and around Mama Lola's world, both in Haiti and New York, ultimately resulted in the publishing of a novel, a work which has so far proved to make one of the most groundbreaking strides towards destigmatizing Haitian Vodou in the public eye. McCarthy Brown addresses this in her introduction of the novel. In Mama Lola, I am most interested in telling rich, textured stories that bring Lourdes and her religion alive, rather than simply trying to refute the negative stereotypes often associated with Vodou. I have chosen to enter the public discussion of Vodou by another route, constructing a portrait of this religion as it is lived by Lourdes and the people closest to her. My aim is to create an intimate portrait of three-dimensional people who are not stand-ins for an abstraction such as the Haitian people, but rather deeply religious individuals with particular histories and rich interior lives. Over the next few years of her life, following the particular ritual described above, McCarthy Brown would come to learn that in order to understand all the complex aspects of Haitian Voodoo as a religion and as a way of life, she would have to throw herself in head first and become as intimate with the religious rituals as the actual practitioners were themselves. Only once she had proved herself worthy of acceptance into Mama Lola's Voodoo family tree was she able to draw together the historical, social, and racial connections that are infused throughout the plot of a book. After undergoing her own personal spiritual transformation, McCarthy Brown was better able to begin to grasp the intricate undertones that surrounded the Afro-Haitian religion. She writes, Voodoo, the new religion that emerged from the social chaos and agony of Haiti's 18th century slave plantations, blended several distinct African religions with French colonial Catholicism. Voodoo is the system they have devised to deal with the suffering that is life, a system whose purpose is to minimize pain, avoid disaster, cushion loss, and strengthen survivors and survival instincts. In the same way that McCarthy Brown sought to explore the complex nature of a vastly unstudied way of life, in the following paper I aim to scrutinize Haitian Voodoo through a range of diversified lenses so as to construct the deeply rooted misconceptions that surround the religion, as well as identify the origins of such stigmatization. In drawing parallels between the repercussions of the African diaspora, the events that produced colonial Haiti, and the current portrayal of Voodoo's complex spiritual traditions in modern-day society and popular culture, I hope to illuminate the vast multidimensionalities of Voodoo through a transnational lens and shed light on the ways that these have been continually disregarded throughout history. Duly unique to the blending of various cultures and traditions from which it arose, with faith-based roots in various ethnic groups of West Africa, and influences from French and Roman Catholicism. Not only is Haitian Voodoo a symptom of the African diaspora, but it is also a product of 17th century colonialism, globalization, and transnationalism, and thus acts as an expression of the congealment of diverse peoples, cultures, and traditions within the global arena. Voodoo arrived in Haiti with the slaves, writes award-winning photojournalist Les Stone in his portfolio titled Voodoo Lives, or Voodoo Lives. For more than 5 centuries it has thrived, giving cultural and spiritual comfort to generations as they survived wars, revolutions, and natural disasters. Voodoo has guided its followers through slavery and the transition to life as free men and women. And yet, through history, remnants of the colonialist depiction of Voodoo, which, as will be illustrated throughout this paper, initially sought to ensure European supremacy, have been continually perpetuated through American popular culture, resulting in a widely misconstrued conception of the syncretic religion as a whole. Thus, the very elements of New Orleans Voodoo that have been advertised through media over time were in fact created exclusively as a means of profit by colonizers, and thus plagued by the same mentality, and are in actuality far more authentic. Nevertheless, counter to these demoralizing depictions, Haitian Voodoo has indeed acted as a crucial survival tool and a vehicle for independence for Afro-Caribbeans from the 17th century to present day, and should thus be recognized as the complex and transnational New World religion that it is. Understanding Voodoo. In comparison to more cross-cultural recognized religions such as Catholicism, Judaism, and Islam, the average American citizens' depth of understanding of Haitian Voodoo as a multidimensional and complex religion is wildly superficial. The reasons behind this lack of knowledge will become steadily apparent throughout the paper, but in efforts to shed light on some of the basic structural components of the religion up front, I aim to provide a brief but well-rounded breakdown of Voodoo in following. By definition, Haitian Voodoo is recognized as a syncretic religion practiced chiefly in and around Haiti and the Afro-Creole diaspora, with roots in spiritual traditions and social cultural practices of various ethnic groups in West Africa, which were brought to the New World via slave ships by European colonizers. The religion was also highly influenced by means of brutal force by French and Roman Catholic belief systems. In the Antilles, the policy of the masters was to force their slaves to give up their culture, which were the language, work methods, religion, and to assimilate to a new one, writes author Ronald Peer in his article Caribbean Religion, the Voodoo Case. Such syncretism, as illustrated by Peer, can be identified in the structure of worship of Haitian Vodou, and a strong transnational relationship between elements of African and European religions can be mutually identified within the foundations of Vodou itself. Derived from the French concept of bon Dieu, meaning good God, Vodou practitioners believe in one almighty creator called Bon Dieu, Bondye, as the legacy of Yoruba god Olorun and Oludomare, with whom the Haitian Bon Dieu is closely linked. This supreme being does not interact with human affairs, and thus remains the ultimate symbol of all things that are unreachably divine. However, as a means of seeking a connection outside of moral life, Vodouisants identify as servants of the spirits and largely attain their connection to the greater intangible forces of the divine realm through supposedly smaller, subservient spirits to Bon Dieu, called Loa or Loa, LWA or LOA. Quite similar to the idea of Catholic saints, there are a vast number of Loa present in Vodou practice, each one having their own name, characterization, and personality. As is kindred to the overarching nature of Haitian Vodou, the personalities of said Loa range in temperament from benevolent to quite harsh, each commanding a different aspect of life that proves vital to Haitian ritual. These fluctuating personalities also reflect the complex dynamics of life, as marked by the Haitian experience over time, and unadulteratedly capture a well-rounded scope of emotion from joy, sorrow, pain, excitement, and everything in between. Although Vodou practitioners view their connectedness with Loa as a sacred and unparalleled privilege, the deeply traditional rituals, like that of Aludres in Mama Lola, in which a priest or priestess actually connects with the divine spirit, known commonly as possession performance, have long since been the target of fearful criticism by non-practitioners throughout history. Accordingly, despite the crucial role possession performance plays in Vodou religious practice, the rituals have been thoroughly distorted throughout history by white colonists who initially sought to demonize and deconstruct the African slave population from within pre-Haitian Revolution. Thus, it can be derived that European Catholic and Afro-Haitian religions' syncretization boasted an immense amount of inherent tension. Author Ronald Peer asserts that this civil syncretism is not in any way a fusion, nor a synthesis, nor an amalgam, but only a white mask put over a black skin. He elaborates in saying, the voodoo has kept its religious originality in spite of the Catholic cloak which circumstances have obliged it to raise in front of its cultural face, and in spite of the Christian ingredients which it uses, by reinterpreting them so as to reinforce its magical effectiveness. Indeed, Haitian Vodou practitioners have lived up to their legacy of resilience in fighting to maintain the connection to their West African roots, are arguably more prominent than the religious influence from Europe. Indeed, Haitian Vodou practitioners have lived up to their legacy of resilience in fighting to maintain the connection to their West African roots, are arguably more prominent than the religious influence from Europe. And even still, centuries after the Haitian Revolution, Vodou has struggled to gain full recognition as an independently thriving religion and escape the demonic shadows cast by Catholic colonists. Distinctions between forms of Vodou. In her anthropological article, Yoruba Influences on Haitian Vodou and New Orleans Vodou, author Ina J. Fandrich asserts that Vodou, as a religion, has many different forms and spellings, each holding a distinct meaning that derives from a slightly different place of origin. Few people know that Vodou is the mystical, bona fide popular religion of Haiti and developed under the yoke of slavery as an assertion of resistance. She writes, even fewer people understand that Haitian Vodou and Voodoo or Vaudou in Louisiana are not the same. So even fewer people understand that Haitian Vodou, Vodou, and Voodoo, Voodou, or Voudou in Louisiana are not the same but different, though related traditions. The reason for this claims Fandrich is deeply rooted in the history of colonial Haiti, both pre and post Haitian Revolution, 1791 to 1804. Although the majority of today's scholars and practitioners of the religion use Vodou, Vodou, as the more accepted orthography in English, as this notation more closely resembles the Nigerian spiritual lineage of Vodun, Vodun, from which it is in part derived. The most commonly referenced form of the religion is written and pronounced Voodoo, Voodoo. However, as supported in Fandrich's in-depth assertion concerning the discrepancies between these two distinct variations of the Afro-Creole religion, the more commonly recognized Voodoo, Voodoo, has developed derogatory and negative connotation over time through the false adoption and dramatization of Voodoo's more marketable qualities, i.e., voodoo dolls. Such stereotypes, Fandrich argues, have continually been perpetuated by popular culture through the centuries, the root of which I will explore in more depth later on. Thus, Haitian practitioners and scholars largely avoid referencing this form of the religion when referencing Haitian religious practice at large. Rather, their adoption of Vodou, Vodou, as the correct terminology has evolved in efforts to corral society's attention back to the religion's West African roots. Fandrich states that this mentality of re-Africanization, which closely resembles the idea behind Pan-Africanism, the black nationalist trademark of organizations such as the Nation of Islam, appeal to Vodou practitioners as an attractive solution for becoming whole again after 500 years of oppression and displacement. Yet, particularly for practitioners in America, the residual power dynamics surrounding Vodou in the United States align expertly with the effects of displacement that have come to be commonplace in transnational exchanges. They are treated as neither fully part of the dominant culture, nor are they fully accepted into the cultures from which their methods of worship originated. Vodou's role in history and the Haitian Revolution. In his comparative study entitled Voodoo and History, author Laurent Dubois asserts that Voodoo has deep roots in the historical past, not only in Africa and Haiti, but in the entire Western Hemisphere. He writes, the religion itself, far from being the antithesis of modernity that it has often been posed to be, in fact, provides a window into the profound after effects of the processes of enslavement, migration, production, and cultural confrontation that have shaped today's Americas. In efforts to provide contextual understanding for the arc of Haitian Vodou as a New World religion, I will next outline a basic timeline for the religion through its origin journey across the Atlantic and eventually its dispersal throughout the Americas. This history begins even before the French colonization of the Western Hemisphere. 1517, roughly 4,000 slaves were imported from the western African coast to what would soon become the French colony of Saint-Domingue on the Caribbean island of Hispaniola. Throughout remaining 16th century and into the 17th, roughly 1681 to 85, a massive slave trade flourished between Africa and the Caribbean islands. Between 1664 and 1789, a growing importation of slaves created large imbalance between white and black populations. By 1791, census shows that the class of whites was roughly 30,826, whereas the class of slaves was 620,000. Even despite the slave population vastly outnumbering the whites, the colonizers maintained power through internally destructive tactics. Between 1685 and 1791, Afro-Atlantic religions in the Western Hemisphere struggled to survive as the French colonists pushed the Christianization of the slaves. Voodoo in colonial Saint-Domingue could only be practiced in the utmost secretive conditions, and yet Haitians continued to assemble and revive their African-rooted traditions through dance, song, and ritual. It was an escape from their daily realities. Writes Laguerre, it became more than just a religion. The political messianic significance of voodoo was a unifying factor in the struggles for liberation. Prophets arose who presented themselves as messengers of voodoo spirits and whose mission was to liberate Africans from the domination of the colonists. 1751, voodoo ceremony in Bois Cayman, where the slaves resolved to exterminate the whites. Laguerre 43. Thus, many historians agree that it was voodoo indeed that allowed the slaves to unify and motivate their activities against the colonists. 1791 to 1804. Starting in 1791 and culminating in 1804, the Haitian Revolution, globally recognized as the first and only successful slave revolt in history, saw the rise to freedom of roughly 500,000 slaves. Though commonly unrecognized, Voodoo appears to have been at the root of the revolt. To the ends illustrated in the historical context above, the practice of Haitian Voodoo has proved to transcend religion throughout history. It is a deeply embedded part of the Haitian psyche, writes photojournalist Les Stone, a survival mechanism and a catalyst of revolutionary politics. Thus, as both central to the survival and independent advancement of the Afro-Haitian diaspora, politically, economically, culturally, and spiritually, from the 16th century to the present day, by means of fostering a large coherency between a historically oppressed group of people. Voodoo is widely recognized by practitioners as an experience that creates a symbiosis between the body and the soul, the tangible and the intangible, the living, the undead, and the divine. New Orleans Voodoo and Transnationalism, 1809 to present day. Throughout his book entitled A Tale of Two Cities, Santo Domingo and New York, after 1950, author Jesse Hoffnung Garskoff studies the cultural exchanges that occurred when Dominican migrants flocked to New York City in the mid 20th century. In scrutinizing both the ways in which the Dominican migrants were impacted, as well as the changes detected in the existing New York neighborhoods after their arrival, Hoffman Garskoff ultimately comes to define the relatively recently coined term transnationalism to be a sort of symbiotic relationship that can, in some cases, encompass any or all three concepts of mutualism: two organisms working together to benefit each other. Commensalism: one organism benefits while the other remains indifferent. Parasitism, parasitism, parasitism: one organism benefiting at the other's expense. More simply, the study of transnationalism is the study of ways in which a migrant group influences the specific area they migrated to, as well as the ways in which the existing inhabitants and culture influenced the migrants and their homelands. Through such a process, the migrant group tends to enter a state of limbo where they no longer fully belong to the culture of origin, as they grow to adopt new cultural practices that are not mirrored at home, nor are they fully accepted into whichever culture they entered. Thus, both both Haitian Vodou and New Orleans Voodoo are prime examples of transnational relationships at work. Having already explored much of the origins behind Haitian Vodou as a product of the forced interaction between West African religious and European Catholicism, what follows is a brief but zeroed in analysis of New Orleans Voodoo through the lens of urban transnationalism. In 1809, shortly following the end of the Haitian Revolution, over 10,000 Haitian refugees migrated in droves to New Orleans, Louisiana. Because it was a place that had been previously colonized by the French and already held a large population of West African slaves, who also shared ties to Yoruba culture, various short social and cultural norms resembled those in Saint Domingo, and Haitian migrants began to infuse rapidly into the fabric of the city upon arrival. Soon, a cultural exchange between the Haitian migrants and the mixture of existing Afro Atlantic and white European New Orleanians began to take place, the results of which would prove to socially, spiritually, and economically alter all three groups immensely in different ways. Because Africans were already residing in Louisiana prior to the arrival of the Haitian refugees, a sort of religious counterculture was established that resembled Vodou, yet seemed to be devoid of the spiritual complexity that its Caribbean cousin was able to maintain towards African divinities. Thus, when Haitian migrants attempted to practice Vodou once in antebellum New Orleans, the significantly higher white to black population ratio imposed a stricter social system through which the religion's strong ties to African tradition rapidly disintegrated. Gradually, Haitian Vodou and the already existing form of Louisiana Voodoo were forced to merge. And because New Orleans' African population was predominantly Congolese, the culture's strong affinity with the spirits of the dead moved to the forefront of religious practice and celebration. With the large influx of Haitian refugees in 1809, New Orleanian voodoo intensified and existing practitioners flourished because of the newfound community. But this was relatively short lived. White New Orleanians started to feel threatened by the exotic practices of Afro Caribbean ritual, and in order to maintain superiority, they quickly saw an opportunity to capitalize on the religion. Voodoo quickly became a mere source of profit, highlighting specific elements and rituals they deemed black magic. The white colonizers rapidly tokenized sacred aspects of both Vodou and Voodoo, and, and word about the marketable culture soon became a tourist attraction for whites across America. As a result, New Orleans' economy boomed, but racial tensions in the city rose and the atmosphere became increasingly segregated. Today, New Orleans voodoo practitioners are largely attempting to capitalize on or profit from the religion. The cultural practices of origin have become less and less recognized in the mainstream public eye. In her article, Yoruba Influences on Haitian Vodou and New Orleans Voodoo, author Ina J. Fandrich asserts that, until very recently, persisting racist assumptions about African history and culture prevented American scholars from recognizing the regional variations in Africa's rich cultural traditions and unique migration patterns of African nations and ethnic groups in the history of the transatlantic slave trade and in the formation of African New World diaspora communities. Thus, Fandrich writes, American popular culture continues to deepen the stigmas around Afrocentric religions and systematically discriminate against the Afro-Caribbean and circum-Caribbean world. Myths and misconceptions in popular culture. Over the centuries, Haitian Vodou and New Orleans Voodoo have continued to be viewed through a distorted lens that focused on the more complex, demonic appearing rituals that are in fact instrumental to the religion's structure and rather simply act as a practitioner's way of connecting with the divine realms. Fandrich asserts that Hollywood's film industry has played a large role in the widespread misrepresentation of voodoo ritual. She asserts that this vilification process has been continued through the production of big screen pictures promoting gross stereotypes. Consequently, says Fandrich, most Americans to this day surmise voodoo to be a particularly vicious form of witchcraft, as modern depictions of such rituals, however, have continually been dramatized in portrayal through countless mainstream films, including but not limited to The Skeleton Eye, The Blair Witch Project, The Serpent and the Rainbow, Angel Heart, and even children's novels such as The Princess and the Frog. In many of these films, besides the largely misguided cinematic representation, a quick internet movie database IMDb search for the film's plot summary will more than suffice for discovering the inaccurate depictions of voodoo, voodoo and voodoo present in Hollywood and thus America at large. For The Skeleton Eye, the plot summary reads as follows. Emphasis has been added to point out the common misrepresentation relating to voodoo. After acquiring a skeleton eye, Caroline makes her way into the secret room within the attic, where she discovers hair, blood, bones, spells, and other instruments for practicing hoodoo. Violet says she has never been in the secret room, but that the items probably belong to the original owners, two house workers who practiced black magic and were lynched as a result. Not only do the connections drawn in the film summary above tie in with US popular culture's gross stereotyping of the way in and with which materials Vodou is traditionally practiced, suggesting its likeness to witchcraft. But the very storyline claiming that workers, the original house workers were lynched for practicing black magic is a direct perpetuation of white European colonists' attempt to dominate over people of black Afro ethnicities. Duly, it is because of this continual and misguided perpetuation of colonial Europe's view of Haitian Vodou throughout popular culture today that the religion remains to be connected with Satanism, witchcraft, zombies, and other evil depictions of black magic in the majority of the general public's eye. It is also sadly unsurprising, therefore, that such vilification and stereotyping has historically even taken root in the American government. In his case study entitled Claims Making and Typifications of Voodoo as a Deviant Religion, Hex, Lies, and Videotape, John P. Bartkowski systematically breaks down the ways in which this particular typification of voodoo emerged during and after the U.S. invasion of Panama, in which claims emanating from the U.S. military strategically highlighted the apparently exotic religious commitments of Manuel Noriega. In short, Noriega, the military dictator for Panama from 1983 to 1989, was framed by the Bush administration and U.S. military officials to be a devout practitioner of voodoo, and thus a malevolent threat to those around him. Claims made in the most stereotypical way possible regarding Noriega's supposed witch house teeming with voodoo artifacts was released in press reports across the country through credible news sources such as the Chicago Tribune and both the Los Angeles and New York Times. After being falsely convicted of drug trafficking, Noriega was denied bond at a prosecution trial in 1991 because he supposedly placed voodoo curses on the trial judge and U.S. attorney. As if this example weren't enough proof of the strategic colonial mindset concerning voodoo at work in America's very own government and military, Bartkowski also introduces President George Bush's coining of the term voodoo economics when referring to his opponent, Ronald Reagan's proposed economic plan. The phrase quickly gained momentum and was recycled by various news sources and congressional leaders. Bartkowski synthesizes that Bush had effectively seized upon and reinforced popular images of voodoo as a set of superstitious beliefs used by its adherents in a manipulative, deceptive fashion. However, the ramification of the memorable phrase would extend well beyond the Republican race for the White House during the late 1970s. The negative cultural perception upon which the phrase voodoo economics was originally based, namely the notion that voodoo is tantamount to superstition and deception, has remained intact throughout this process. In both the cases of Manuel Noriega's faulty prosecution and Bush's coining of voodoo economics, a historical parallel can be drawn between the little change in America's overall perception of voodoo as a religion from colonial Haiti to present day. In reality, Haitian Vodou and the spirits who serve as central aspects of the spiritual traditions of the Afro-Atlantic diaspora are much more three-dimensional than they have historically been employed to emphasize cultural and racial difference in a most unflattering manner. In taking a closer look at the identities of many of the spirits themselves, one would find that woven within his or her spirit identities resides the foundations of issues with larger social implications than exists exclusively in the realm of Vodou. One such greater implication is the racial and gender related divide that has survived through history and still deeply plagues modern day society. In conclusion, Vodou in present day, as Bartkowski points out in his abstract, to claims making and typifications, remarkably little scholarship has examined the nature, scope, and sources of these negative perceptions about voodoo in US cultural discourse. Yet, in present day America, many voodoo practicing communities exist in a few key major cities around the United States, namely New York, Louisiana, New Orleans, Los Angeles, and Baltimore. While these tight knit groups operate largely in an underground fashion, making them difficult to identify to the untrained eye, voodoo, as both an ethnographic and anthropological study, is gradually becoming a larger topic of study among historians and scholars. This path has been largely paved not only by McCarthy Brown, but also Maya Deren, a woman who, like McCarthy Brown, was accepted and initiated into Haitian Vodou after diving headfirst into her fieldwork surrounding the religion. Deren's book, Divine Horsemen, The Living Gods of Haiti, provides a fluid and detailed narrative that also works to delineate the Haitian cult of Vodou through an intimate look at the inner workings of Vodou worship. The photographs of Les Stone's Vodou Lives portfolio for the World Policy Journal set Vodou into a present day context. Stone says he was unsurprised to find that shortly following the recent Haitian earthquake, which killed roughly 316,000 people and rendered over another million lives, Vodou seemed to be the glue to hold everyone together. As an amalgam of the temporal and spiritual realm, Vodou experienced a strong revival after the cataclysmic earthquake in January 2010. As Haitians struggled to grapple with the countless sudden deaths of so many friends and family, many found solace in the Vodou notion that those who die today will return in some form tomorrow. When comparing this to the way that the slaves of 17th century colonial Haiti turned to Vodou as a means of finding answers to life's unanswerable questions, it seems that the religion, for all intents and purposes, is far more deeply ingrained in the Afro-Atlantic descendants than any European colonizer of the time period was comfortable admitting. In attempts to deconstruct some of the deeply rooted misconceptions of Haitian Vodou as it has been presented to society for centuries, throughout this paper I have chosen to break down the religion into various subsections so as to scrutinize it not just through the typical European colonialist lens, but rather through one which is more overtly apt towards a world historiographical and transnational perspective. In recognizing Haitian voodoo as not only a phenomenon born out of the tumultuous and amplified cross-cultural interactions of globalization and colonialism in 17th century Haiti, but also largely as the expression of the congealment of diverse peoples, cultures, and traditions within this global arena, we are able to discern that it was indeed a symptom of the African diaspora and duly a religion that white European colonists sought to exterminate. Furthermore, In summary of the main points of this essay, a closer look at Haitian Vodou as not just a misunderstood syncretic New World religion, but rather an entire way of life, reveals that the spiritual practice has served as both a survival tool and vehicle for independence, pre and post Haitian Revolution. In reality, Vodou serves as a center of unity and solidarity amongst much of the African diaspora of the Western Hemisphere, and it has acted as a training ground for leadership that continued to be a high functioning religion of the masses after emancipation and independence. Consequently, if society at all wishes to move forward in scrutinizing Haitian Vodou not through the distorted lens that has for so long been perpetuated by American popular culture, but instead through an appreciative and curious lens similar to Karen McCarthy Brown's approach in exploring the world of Mama Lola, it is critical that we as a society, through means of deeper education in anthropological, ethnographic, and religious fields of study, work avidly to decolonize our perception of Afro-Atlantic religions such as Vodou and Voodoo. This, however, will not be an easy feat. Will be no easy feat. Many hold firm in predicting that if such a widespread decolonization of Vodou through the public eye isn't achieved, the effects could quickly become reminiscent of past history. The intense search for going beyond the human condition has made the voodoo a messianism, and it is not surprising that it has been the very root from which sprang up the slave revolt in 1791, which culminated in the Haitian independence in 1804, writes Ronald Pierre in his ethnographic study, Caribbean Religion, the Voodoo Case. Voodoo today has been domesticated and commercialized. Should it happen that it finds again a less compromised voodoo clergy, it will not be an opium anymore. Rather, it will be a help for liberation once again, and with it, once again, 1791 may well occur. Thank you very much for joining me today in reading this article. There are some lovely photographs at the bottom. I want to be on a journey to read journal articles that are open access, so I'm avidly searching for such articles. See you soon.